This video was made in sponsorship with Hear Well, Be Well Clinics. Compassionate, trustworthy, and innovative. Check them out. Hi, Wendy. Thank you so much for joining me on an episode of Hear Me Out. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, April. Thanks so much for inviting me on.
Yes, it's wonderful that you're here. I like to start off all my guests with the question, what is your connection to hearing loss?
I have sort of an odd connection to hearing loss. I have this wonderful thing called central auditory processing disorder. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's not really considered hearing loss. It's considered more neurodivergent because what goes into my ears is reaching the nerves just fine, but
Okay.
somewhere between the ears and my brain, it goes all awry. So there's a lot of the same symptoms as there is with hearing loss, not being able to function very well in background noise. Um, then we add things like easily distracted. For instance, if when I was younger, a lot younger, I'd be sitting in the classroom and the teacher would be talking, and all I could hear was the clock ticking. And so the brain doesn't understand what it's supposed to focus on. It doesn't understand what the important information is. So it's now considered in the category of neurodivergence. But back when I was a lot younger, of course, if you did well in school, nobody was like, "Oh, we need to test for something."
Right.
It actually took 12 years for me to even get glasses because I did well in school. So nobody figured there was anything off kilter, as it were. But yeah, so the central auditory processing disorder, because it's like having hearing loss to some extent, that made me very interested in the category. And the more I looked at it, the more I was like, holy crow, there are so many other things about health that are connected to hearing loss. And being neurodivergent, I, of course, went down the rabbit holes looking for all the things, talk about hyperfocus, and discovered all these amazing things that are connected to your hearing and that can have negative outcomes because of untreated hearing loss. So,
Right.
yeah, it was really great. And I'm currently the research and marketing manager for Hear Well, Be Well, which is a small family run group of clinics in Ontario, Canada. And that's given me the opportunity to keep going down those rabbit holes.
Well, that's so wonderful. Well, thank you for sharing it. That's very fascinating to hear of all these different things associated with your ears that aren't always hearing loss. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And when did you get diagnosed? Like what age did you become
In my
aware of it?
20s. Yeah,
In your
in my
20s. Okay.
20s. Mm-hmm.
Wow. And now I'm sure you have lots of tr tips and tricks to kind of help you through situations. So that's wonderful.
Well,
Do you
when I
think,
was 7,
yeah.
the way I handled things was to shout at people to shut up. I spent many a day in the principal's office because the teacher would be trying to teach a class and my classmates would be goofing off and carrying on, and I would stand up next to my desk and yell, "Shut up, I can't hear her."
Oh my goodness. That must have been tough though to not know you had that at that age to later find out in your 20s. Do you find it hard to advocate for yourself because it's not quite hearing loss? Like, do you find that people, it's one of those things that we just have to continuously educate people on, just like hearing loss?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Particularly in a work environment.
Mhm.
When I worked in the financial services industry, everybody was in little cubicles.
Mhm.
And there was all the socialization going on in the hallway between the cubicles, or the people in the cubicles next to me would be getting rowdy. And it would basically shut me right down because if I was trying to work, I was so overcome by all of these things that were happening. So, yeah, you got to make sure that your manager understands And if it's a manager looking after a lot of different people, you have to remind them kind of frequently. Like when I go to large events, sitting at the front of the room makes me more connected to the speaker, but at the same time also has all those distractions going on behind me. And so my brain is very engaged with all the distractions. So I have to advocate for myself for where I sit in the room. There have been times when I've been put in a seat and I look around to find the right seat, and I'll get up and ask somebody to change seats with me. So you do have to speak up for yourself, whether it's because you're neurodivergent or because you have hearing loss. The only person who's going to look out for you is you.
Right, exactly. Such a good point to make. And I think that's hard for a lot of people to accept and kind of like realize they're going to have to constantly advocate for themselves because again, you're the one looking out for yourself in every situation that you enter. So absolutely, absolutely. And you
I
mentioned
had a
you work
great.
for Hear Well Be Well.
Mhm.
Have you encountered um like what are some of the biggest misconceptions you've encountered with in the hearing loss industry that you find people just don't understand?
One of the things that I find really interesting is the stigma
Mm,
around hearing aids. And I've done a lot of work in behavioral economics.
okay.
And that's kind of, that examines human biases and the things that they drag along with them from their childhood. And the things that we learn in childhood are profound to us at that particular time. So folks who are my age would have seen Auntie Vi or Uncle Harold with hearing aids that just scream feedback whenever they put them on, that were sort of big and clunky. And when you wanted to use one of those microphones to sort of amplify directly to your hearing aids, it was this gigantic box that hung off your chest. And so we dragged those visions along with us from childhood. So there's still a certain stigma around having hearing aids because we associate them with Auntie Vi and Uncle Harold from the 50s and 60s. And we are not as open to what is the current reality because we're
Right.
brown bagging those biases. Because hearing aids now are so tiny, crazy tiny, and people wander around with earbuds in all the time. So having something in your ears, even if it is visible, is no longer a thing. If anything, for old people, it makes you look kind of hip and happening, because all the young kids are wearing them. So now you look like you're part of the hip and happening crowd. So that's one of the things that I spend a lot of time trying to get people to understand is those stigmas. You're dragging them along yourself.
That's a good point. I really like that perspective of how, everyone has earbuds in these days. So there's constant talk around your ears, but then when it comes to hearing aids, it's always like, I don't know. But do you find that like size does matter? Like they're so tiny now, you can't see them. Like, should they be more visible to help with the stigma? Like, what do you think about that?
I don't know if they need to be more visible. I think there, however, does need to be an honesty about them because I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and we were talking about neurodivergence and hearing loss, and just a whole mishmash of things, the way you do when you're having just a casual conversation, or at least you do when you're neurodivergent because you can't stay on the same path for very long. um, and I came to the conclusion that all of these categories, hearing loss, wears hearing aids, neurodivergent, disabled, whatever, there are more people in the world who have something special about them than there are people who do not have something special about them. So the idea of what is normal should, in fact, in my wacky world, be completely changing. The
Yeah,
people who are divergent are the people that we currently call normal because there's just so few people now who don't have some aspect of them that is special because we're paying more attention to it.
that's true. That's a
So
good
there's
point.
a lot broader definition. There's a lot broader definition of neurodivergent. We're able to measure hearing loss so much more precisely now. And so there's a lot more people with hearing loss. There's a lot more people who recognize even severe arthritis as a disability. So when you think about it, sort of play in your head, how many friends do you have that don't have something special about them?
That's such a good point. And I think that all comes back to education too, I think, and honesty and just
Yes.
honest conversations. Because I think a lot of it surrounds stigma and how we just don't want to accept those special things about us. But that is what truly makes us unique. And we should be proud of those things that set us apart from others. Um, Even if it does add a little bit of difficulty to our daily lives, it shouldn't matter. Like it makes us who we are. So that's a wonderful perspective. I really like that. That's wonderful. I kind of want to dive into one of the articles you recently wrote. You did some research around people who are affected by people who have hearing loss in ways that we might not quite understand. I wonder if you can kind of dive in and elaborate on that for us.
Absolutely. As you talk about frequently, hearing loss is not age specific. So it's not just old people. And a lot of the stuff that's written about hearing loss is very focused on sort of the 60 plus group of people. But there are impacts like the effect of hearing loss on your friends and family that it doesn't matter how old you are and it gets lost in the shuffle. There was a big survey that was done by the American Association of Retired People, and that's where really specific numbers come from, that demonstrated that 50%, so essentially half of the people who have hearing loss that leave their hearing loss untreated will suffer relationship breakdown. And that's sort of at the communication partner level, where it's spouse or siblings or children or caregivers. Those somewhat more intimate relationships, even best friend, that half of them will experience some relationship breakdown. And while that survey, that research was done with a group of retired people, when you think about the dynamic of relationships, it's not age exclusive. A 30-year-old wife and a 32-year-old husband, as an example, if that wife is experiencing the husband's hearing loss, the same kind of things are going to happen. Having to repeat yourself all the time, having to speak louder, having to cover the embarrassment out in public places when they say something inappropriate. So all of those things are experienced more deeply. It's been said that your hearing loss is not just your problem, it's your family's problem too.
Right.
Because of the impact, the World Health Organization has actually recognized that communication partner relationship with someone with untreated hearing loss as a third party disability, because they go through the same depressions, they go through the same level of aggravation, but they have the sort of added burden of becoming a caregiver
Right.
and managing the world for that person who has untreated hearing loss. So, so many people become self-absorbed, like insanely self-absorbed when they have hearing loss. This is my problem. I'll deal with it. It's none of your business. Don't talk to me about it. Those kinds of things. And we've discovered through some research, but also just sort of anecdotally because of some of the writings that we have out there, that when people realize what they're doing to the people that they love,
Yeah.
they become much more interested in doing something about it. Because even just the idea of shouting to be heard, the human body is built in a way that shouting creates a fight or flight kind of switch in your brain goes off, which then raises your blood pressure, increases your heart rate, all of these things that are not necessarily physically healthy. And so not only does it affect your state of mind, how you feel about the relationship, but now it's also affecting how you feel physically. So, and a lot of people don't understand that connection.
Right. That's such a good point, though. Like, you don't, like you said, the people who have the hearing loss internalize it. And I think that that is something, again, comes back to the education piece, comes back to just talking about it more and just being more honest with ourselves. And yeah, that's fascinating. Do you think that the 50% who go untreated, do you find that a lot of it is associated with cost of hearing aids? Like, is there some sort of gap there that's kind of leading people to be untreated, or is it more stigma? Like, in your perspective, like, what do you find maybe the leading cause if they don't know, education, resources? Like,
What
why do you
I
think
find
people
kind of, yeah, what I find kind of interesting is getting them to take the step to even get the hearing test,
That's true. That
which
is the first step.
which in so many geographies, the hearing test is free.
Yeah.
It's certainly free at Here Will Be Well, and most of the other clinics that I've interacted with here in Ontario. Excuse me. So take the step and find out, because there are mitigating actions that you can take if you have hearing loss and you can't afford hearing aids.
Right.
There are lifestyle changes that you can make. There is educating the people around you. So just ignoring it, for me, shouldn't be an option. It should be go and get the hearing test and at least be educated on the state of affairs, particularly since symptoms of hearing loss can show up from things that aren't actually hearing loss, like having a great big tube of wax in your ears can muffle the world. And once you get that out of there, you hear the world the same again. But you don't know unless you go and get that hearing test.
That's so
And
true.
yeah, and beyond a shadow of a doubt, hearing aids are expensive. And there's a huge range of prices. And
Right.
the range of prices really exists because of the level of technology. When you think about what hearing aids can do now compared to what they could do in the mid 90s, it's profound. Computing is a wonderful thing where hearing aids are concerned. And in Ontario, we do have this assistive devices program, which is monitored by the Ministry of Health of the Ontario government, and the ADP program, assistive devices program, um, does do $500 per hearing aid in support. We at Here Will Be Well, we have come to the conclusion that that's kind of insufficient because it's been $500 for 30 years.
Right.
And how the cost of hearing aids has changed in that 30 years is quite profound. Back when they invented it in the mid 90s, invented the hearing loss coverage for ADP, $500 could essentially cover the cost of the hearing aids. So that was wonderful. That was great. It allowed a lot of people, who got over their stigma to go out and get hearing aids. Now it's a fraction of the cost of hearing aids. So we put together a petition, which you can find on the Hear Well Be Well website. We are asking the ministry to instruct the ADP folks to re-examine costs and how much they will support hearing aids. Because, yes, we sell hearing aids, but one of our main missions is that education. Right. And people get set in their head, I can't afford hearing aids, so they don't get the hearing test. And so, we humans are amazing. We can come up with a million reasons not to do something. and that just adds to the list of why you don't go and get a hearing test, because hearing aids are too expensive, but you don't even know if you need hearing aids, so right. Go and get the test. We also have a program, because we recognize the expense of hearing aids. We have a program called the Gift of Hearing program, which people can either nominate someone they love who is unable to afford hearing aids. They can be nominated, and there's a form on the website. And you can also just apply for your own self. So if you suspect you have hearing loss, you are in dire financial straits, you can apply. And we've done between 5 and 10 awards of free hearing aids and service each year. And this year, starting for 2025, we're going to be running it just all year round. It used to be a very event sort of oriented thing, May usually, because it's Speech and Hearing Month. And it was just like, you know what? Let's just have it go all the time, because not everybody realizes in May that they could use that support. So yeah, so we love that program. And we get very excited every time somebody gets free hearing aids and service from us. And we're very happy with one of the manufacturers, Beltone, because they support us in providing the hearing aids at no cost. And then we contribute the costs of all the follow-up service and all the follow-up appointments, so that somebody can hear again.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think I'm going to make sure I include both those links, the petition and the Give Back program, in the caption, because that's just phenomenal. And I think a lot of people need to be more aware of that. And that is the first step with the petition side, is just the awareness and bringing attention to the government that, hey, this needs to change. And I'm sure that's the other thing too. Like, if you ask someone, do you know anyone with hearing loss or hearing aids? Likely will say, yes, I do. And it might be their grandparent or someone, but I don't think I've ever encountered someone who doesn't know someone that is affected by hearing loss in a mild or profound way. And that's just fantastic that Hear Will Be Well does that. That's absolutely wonderful. More programs like that need to exist to help people. So
well, and something that I could certainly coach for your listeners who are not in one of the geographies that Hear Well Be Well is in, because we only have 13 locations in Ontario. We don't have anywhere else, is to check in, do some research, because there are lots of clinics, particularly the smaller family-owned and operated ones, who do have programs like Gift of Hearing. So don't just throw your hands in the air and surrender. Like, do a little research to see if there is a program in your area, a clinic or a manufacturer running a program where you can get that kind of either deeply, deeply discounted or free hearing aids, and then the support you need to be successful with those hearing aids.
Right. Absolutely. And that's the thing I think, at least for my hearing loss journey, is when I was experiencing issues, hearing loss was the last thing on my mind that until I went to the doctor and learned I needed to get a hearing test, I didn't know I could take those steps to help the issues that I was having. So as much as research is wonderful, I guess it's a matter of getting to that first step of a hearing test, which maybe we just need to promote in general. Like, doesn't matter if you're having issues or anything, just take control of your overall health, which includes your ears.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And in our marketing, in our messaging out in public, um, we don't in fact sell hearing aids.
Right,
We sell the hearing test
right,
because that's what's important. People knowing where they stand in their overall health, because hearing loss increases your risk of developing dementia. If it's severe hearing loss, it's up to a 5 times greater risk of developing dementia. Um, Falls, even with mild hearing loss, you have a 3 times greater risk of having a serious fall. And when you think about, particularly for younger people, when you think about some of the work environments that people are in, if you suddenly fell down, there could be serious repercussions for yourself as well as your coworkers. And that untreated hearing loss can really impact things. One of the things that they think is the brain is just overworked, because when you have hearing loss, the puzzle solving part of your brain is working super hard to try and figure out what the sound is, what people are saying. And it takes a surprising amount of brain power for the human body to be upright and moving forward. And so you combine how hard you're trying to puzzle out your world with all the stuff that keeps you moving forward, and the brain will just go, "You're falling down now."
that's so
So
true.
yeah, yeah. So looking at those kinds of things, even depression, an increased risk of developing depression. And understandably, because when you have hearing loss, you kind of start to isolate yourself because you're tired of asking people to repeat themselves. You're tired of the looks that you get when you don't understand what somebody's saying. So yeah, so even depression. So get the bloody hearing test.
Yeah, exactly. And before we go, do you have any tips or words of advice on how to advocate for yourself, whether it be for hearing loss or whether it be for your auditory disorder? Before we go, any last words of advice?
I think it takes a little bit of brave, but let's face it, we all have at least a little bit of brave in
Yes.
ourselves. And no matter what your superpower is, no matter what it is that makes you special, that's exactly what it does, is it makes you special in a good way. So if you're going into a situation where you know it's going to be a better situation for yourself, if you get what you need, just ask.
Yeah.
The absolute worst thing that could possibly happen is somebody says, "Yeah, sorry, we can't accommodate you." That's the worst thing that could happen,
That's so
because
true.
we are well past the grade school playground teasing and antics.
Yeah.
Well, there's probably still some of that going
For
on
the
in
most part, yeah.
the playground, but we're grown-ups. We're adults. Even if we're not grown up, we're still adults.
Yes.
And there is no shame and there is no harm in saying, "I need to sit over there because I'm going to experience this event better if I do."
Right. Absolutely. That is a wonderful note to leave on. And exactly, there's no shame in what makes you special because
That's right.
that's just who you are.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Wendy. This has been an absolute wonderful conversation.
Thank you for inviting me, April. It's always great to see you.
Take care.
You too. Bye bye.